clean. You asked me about Henry Ashton and young Perth. Did I teach the one his vices and the other his debauchery? Pause again. So vices and debauchery, these are words that are synonymous with sin and lust, and they go against the innocence and purity that we're talking about in Dorian Gray's face. If Kent's silly son takes his wife from the streets, what is that to me? So apparently Kent's son married a hooker, and that's why he lost his reputation. That's an echo, of course, of the relationship with Sybil Vane, who was not a hooker, obviously, but she was of low class, and Dorian was going to marry her. What's that to me? If Adrian Singleton writes his friend's name across a bill, am I his keeper? I know how people chatter in England. The middle class air their moral prejudices over their gross dinner tables and whisper about what they call the profligacies of their betters in order to try and pretend that they are in smart society and on intimate terms with the people they slander. In this country, it is enough for a man to have distinction and brains for every common tongue to wag against him. And what sort of lives do these people who pose at being moral lead themselves? My dear fellow, you forget that we are in the native land of the hypocrite. This is whataboutism, right? Dorian Gray is trying to say, what about all these other people in the middle classes who live terrible lives? Why don't we get mad at them? You're only mad at me because I'm in the upper class. So he's trying to shift the topic. He's not denying that he's done bad things. He's just simply saying, what about all these other people? They're doing bad things and you're not mad at them. Dorian, cried Hallward, this is not the question. England is bad enough, I know, and English society is all wrong. That is the reason why I want you to be fine. You have not been fine. One has a right to judge of a man by the effect he has over his friends. Yours seem to lose all sense of honor and goodness, of purity. You have filled them with a madness for pleasure. That's probably a reference to the new hedonism, the sort of religion that Dorian is living in his own life due to the influence of Lord Henry. They have gone down into the depths. You led them there. Yes, you led them there. And yet you can smile as you are smiling now, and there is worse behind. I know you and Harry are inseparable. Surely for that reason, if none other, you should not have made his sister's name a byword. Take care, Basil, you go too far. I must speak, and you must listen. You shall listen. When you met Lady Gwendolen, not a breath of scandal had ever touched her. Is there a single decent woman in London now who would drive with her in the park? Why, even her children are not allowed to live with her. Then there are other stories. Stories that you have been seen creeping at dawn out of dreadful houses and slinking in disguise into the foulest dens in London. Are they true? Can they be true? When I first heard them, I laughed. I hear them now, and they make me shudder. Pause. So apparently Dorian has ruined the name and reputation of Lord Henry's sister, Gwendolen. If you recall, he met her for the first time the night that Sybil committed suicide, or the night after, when he went to the opera with Lord Henry. So something's happened to her. What about your country house and the life that is led there? Dorian, you don't know what is said about you. I won't tell you that I don't want to preach to you. I remember Harry saying once that every man who turned himself into an amateur curate for the moment always begins by saying that and then proceeds to break his word. I do want to preach to you. Pause again. All right, so we're starting to see some more religious language show up. In particular in what Basil is saying to Dorian. If Basil's a God figure, I think this is an important line. Or if he's an angelic figure, a savior figure, somebody who is going to try and save Dorian from his life of sin, he says, I do want to preach to you. So he's not trying to hide his intentions. He's not cloaking them in any way. He's just being very forthright and out there. I want you to lead such a life as will make the world respect you. I want you to have a clean name and a fair record. I want you to get rid of the dreadful people you associate with. Don't shrug your shoulders like that. Don't be so indifferent. You have a wonderful influence. Let it be for good, not for evil. Interesting, we got the word clean in here. We were talking about influence again. Dorian is an influence for evil. He's having negative impacts on everybody he associates with. Basil says, have a positive impact. Let's change. They say you corrupt everyone with whom you become intimate, and that it is quite sufficient for you to enter a house for shame of some kind to follow after. I don't know whether it is so or not. How should I know? But it is said of you. I am told things that it seems impossible to doubt. Lord Gloucester was one of my greatest friends at Oxford. He showed me a letter that his wife had written to him when she was dying alone in her villa at Mentone. Your name was implicated in the most terrible confession I ever read. I told him that it was absurd, that I knew you thoroughly and you were incapable of anything of the kind. Know you? I wonder, do I know you? Before I could answer that, I should have to see your soul. Great line, Oscar Wilde. I should have to see your soul. That's interesting because obviously he painted the picture that is now a picture of Dorian's soul, and just saying that, sort of brings everything into a razor focus here. To see my soul, muttered Dorian Gray, staring up from the sofa and turning almost white with fear. Yes, answered Hallward gravely, and with deep-toned sorrow in his voice. To see your soul, but only God can do that. And that's ironic too. If Basil's a god figure, this is a really interesting moment. A bitter laugh of mockery broke from the lips of the younger man. You shall see it yourself tonight, he cried, seizing a lamp from the table. Come, it is your own handiwork. Why shouldn't you look at it? You can tell the world about it afterwards if you choose. Nobody would believe you. If they did believe you, they would like me all the better for it. I know the age better than you do, though you will prate about it so tediously. Come, I tell you, you have chattered enough about corruption. Now you shall look on it face to face. There was a madness of pride in every word he uttered. He stamped his foot upon the ground in his boyish, insolent manner. He felt a terrible joy at the thought that someone else was to share his secret, and that the man who had painted the portrait that was the origin of all his shame was to be burdened for the rest of his life with the hideous memory of what he had done. All right, so Dorian is going to show Basil the picture. That's kind of a big moment. It's a confessional sort of a moment. But I think there's some interesting little tidbits in terms of characterization of Dorian in here. When you look at these lines, it says, he felt a terrible joy that the thought that someone else was to share his secret. So there's a confessional sort of moment. And that the man who had painted the portrait that was the origin of all of his shame was to be burdened for the rest of his life with a hideous memory of what he had done. Well, is the portrait the origin of his shame? Or are his actions the origin of his shame? I think we can tell from here that Dorian fancies that it's not his actions that are the origin of the shame, but the portrait itself, that somehow the portrait has become the shameful thing rather than what he has done. And I think as readers, Oscar Wilde is asking us to think about what is shameful about us and reminding us sort of through the contrast with the reality and what Dorian is denying, what causes real shame. Yes, he continued, coming closer to him and looking steadfastly into his stern eyes, I shall show you my soul. You shall see the thing that you fancy only God can see. Hallward started back. My kid just bounced on the ceiling, and one of the light bulbs, which is out in the light in here, just turned on. So if you see a light level change, that's what's going on. That distracted me. I've got to get back to what I was doing. Hallward started back. That's blasphemy, Dorian, he cried. You must not say things like that. They are horrible, and they don't mean anything. You think so? He laughed again. I know so. And as for what I said to you tonight, I said it for your good. You know I have always been a staunch friend to you. Don't touch me. Finish what you have to say. A twisted flash of pain shot across the painter's face. He paused for a moment, and a wild feeling of pity came over him. After all, what right had he to pry into the life of Dorian Gray? If he had done a tithe, interesting, that's another religious word, it means 10%, usually what you give to the church. If he had done a tithe of what was rumored about him, how much he must have suffered. Then he straightened himself up and walked over to the fireplace and stood there, looking at the burning logs with their frost-like ashes and their throbbing cores of flame. This whole scene is, I think, a powerful little moment. Basil says a tithe of what he's done. He thinks that Dorian is punishing himself through his own conscience and how he's feeling. And while he's thinking these thoughts, he's staring at the flame, which is obviously symbolic of hell. Thinking about judgment and what Dorian is suffering. All of this, of course, is thematic and symbolic. I am waiting, Basil, said the young man in a hard, clear voice. He turned around. What I have to say is this, he cried. You must give me some answer to these horrible charges that are made against you. If you tell me that they are absolutely untrue from beginning to end, I shall believe you, Dorian. Deny them, Dorian, deny them. Can't you see what I am going through? My God, don't tell me that you are bad and corrupt and shameful. Dorian Gray smiled. There was a curl of contempt in his lips. Come upstairs, Basil, he said quietly. I keep a diary of my life from day to day, and it never leaves the room in which it is written. I shall show it to you if you come with me. I shall come with you, Dorian, if you wish it. I see I have missed my train. That makes no matter. I can go tomorrow. But don't ask me to read anything tonight. All I want is a plain answer to my question. That shall be given to you upstairs. I could not give it here. You will not have to read long. It's the end of the chapter. Basil is heading upstairs with Dorian to see the quote-unquote diary of his life from day to day and read it. It's obviously a pretty good cliffhanger, and this is a moment with sort of a God figure and a humanity figure, sort of a calling to judgment for what he's done, which is obviously important. And now he's going to go up and sort of confess what he's done and who he is to Basil. And I think we'll see what goes on in that next chapter. Again, I'll stop and I won't burden you with analysis right now. We'll do a little bit of that before we jump into the chapter next time. And I'm just going to sign off. See ya.